So good to be together again this evening, and wanted to continue with the initial thoughts we had this morning, talking about the spiritual goal or purpose that we have given in this life. What a privilege to think that we have a destination that is not in question. For so many people that still maybe are in doubt, where are you going in life? And turning around and almost wandering around through life the same way the Israelites were wandering around in the wilderness. So many still, you feel a sadness and a sympathy that so many are feeling, that sense of confusion. But what a blessing that in Christ that's answered, that's dealt with. There is no doubt. We're headed for heaven. We're headed for paradise. Amazing blessings await us. And so all the more reason for us to give ourselves wholly and completely in our dedication to God and give Him all the glory and all the thanksgiving and all the praise that we have in our lives. And so I wanted to kind of continue with that thought and answer that question, the counter to that many sometimes find themselves responding and saying, well, why would I change my spiritual destination when I found paradise on earth? Maybe some feel that they have found that and have found a sense that have finally found maybe purpose in life, and maybe feel like, well, it's taken me so long to get here, and so many sacrifices I've made, and so many efforts, and so many pitfalls along the way, that certainly this has to be the answer for my life, that God perhaps has given me all these things, and so why not hang on to them? Why not build a solid place for me here in this present life? And we want to deal with that a little bit, and Jesus does deal with that and gives us really an ultimatum and says, while we may very well find a sense of paradise in terms of maybe immense blessing, immense purpose, things that just seem to just fit very well. And sometimes that happens in life. We find ourselves in situations where it just seems like, how could anything be better than this? Especially when things have been so bad in the past, and this is where I'm finally at in my life. And to want to have that sense of preservation or just kind of hanging on to it and building on it. And Jesus addresses that in Matthew chapter 16, which is interesting because the perspective that Jesus has here are individuals that really professed that when they followed Christ, they were hoping to find both. That's really what Peter is professing. He's professing the reason he was following Christ is he wanted this kingdom on earth. He truly believed that Jesus was the answer for that perfect kind of utopia life here in this present world, that he was the key, he was the answer. And when Jesus starts talking about sacrifice, when Jesus starts talking about separation from this life, letting this world bring whatever it can upon you, and yet giving your hope to God. And Peter said, no, that should never happen to you. And here comes the rebuke by Jesus, and then an ultimatum and the truth that if we want to find the true paradise of God, we must be willing to sacrifice any sense of feeling that we want to take certain serious permanent roots here and ascribe or try to build something of permanence here in this present life. And we're going to face challenges with that, but I believe Jesus helps us to realize it really is one or the other. And notice what he says here in Matthew chapter 16. He continues with this discourse with Peter. And notice in verse 21, Matthew chapter 16 and verse 21, he says, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised up on the third day. In other words, what he was speaking about was sacrificing any permanent sense of nobility or longing or riches or honor that were on this present earth. And that was something that Peter himself seems that's preposterous. Isn't that the whole reason we're following you? Isn't that why you came here? To set all of this right. To make sure that those who serve God can have both loyalty with God and, well, what's in it for me here? Don't I get some of this? Don't I get a piece of the pie? All the enemies of God seem to enjoy it. How much more we should. That seemed to be the attitude. How much more should we deserve to have all the best, all the comforts, all the riches, all the glory here, especially because we're serving you? And Jesus challenges them with that. And here comes the statement from Peter. In verse 22, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. It shouldn't happen to you. It should never happen to you because we don't expect it to happen to us. In other words, why are we following you is really what Peter said. What's the purpose of all this? If you're just to lose all of this glory, it's yours. And here's where Jesus comes and answers. And notice what he says in verse 23. He turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. And we can very easily put our own name there. If we ever find ourselves like Peter having that attitude, don't we deserve or shouldn't we also have because we are following you? That's Satan. Satan is the god of this world. The truth is, all this, yes, belongs to God. It's all his. But all of it is to be used for his glory, for his purposes. And the devil has come to deceive the inhabitants of this earth, thinking that it belongs to us. And it doesn't. None of it. It doesn't belong to us. This is God's world. He created it. It's for his purpose. And if anything that has allowed us to enjoy it, we are the stewards of it. Which even if he does allow us to have some blessing of life, and he does. If he allows us to have some comforts in life, a great career, a profitable income, all those things that, yes, are not sinful at all to have. But to always keep in mind, we are merely the stewards of those things for his glory. And so even in that sense, it's not ours. It doesn't belong to us. We don't get it. But he bestows it on those who he believes are faithful enough. And what an honor for a Christian that God, like someone like Job, says, look, have you considered my servant Job? I believe God does that. If you considered my servant, he's going to use these things for his purposes. And if he does, he allows, no doubt, those that are willing to honor God, and he will bless them. But we must keep in mind, that's never the purpose for us to hang on to those things. They're merely tools that we can use. And so that's what he was trying to get into the mind of Peter. Notice he says, you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's. Make no mistake about that. Peter was misguided here. And so notice how he helps him unravel this difficulty he's facing. And he tells him this very difficult but plain truth. Here in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself. And that is personal ambition. That's not mistaken. That's not an abusive way of treating ourselves. Say, well, I'm not allowed to enjoy things in life. No, that's an excessive sense of treating those things. No, there's nothing sinful with riches. There's nothing sinful with comfort. There's nothing sinful with success. But what is sinful is when we allow those things to be our main ambition. When that becomes our sole purpose for living, or even when we sense to manipulate our faith, and then maybe sometimes have that attitude, well, because I'm serving God, shouldn't I then maybe feel an entitlement or deserve these things because I just merely want them? Remember, we talked about this morning, there's no greater blessing for us than to know we're headed for an eternal paradise that surpasses anything we could ever have in this present life. So all the more reason for us to be content. And if we are blessed with comfort, if we are blessed with riches, if we are blessed with success, all the more reason to use it for God's purposes and his glory. And to be stewards for that. But notice sometimes we can be misguided with that. And so he says the answer to this is sacrificing personal desire, personal fleshly desire. To make sure that we are the ultimate humble servant, merely willing to just be put in whatever position God sees fit for us, as we talked about with the parable of the talents. There are some that are going to be blessed with 5 talents. There's some even more than that. Because God has considered them what? Faithful. God has considered them faithful. So no reason for us either to be jealous or to be competitive even about them amongst one another. But God considers us faithful in our areas, and he will bestow upon us what he sees fit, what he will allow. But notice what he says there in verse 25. He says, now, whoever wishes to save his life, that is, we let that ambition become so much of a precedence in our life, we're willing to make certain compromises, even in our faith, to make sure we preserve the comforts of this life. All of a sudden, worship to God comes second place. All of a sudden, coming to the Lord's meeting house on the first day of the week, that's no longer important, because if that gets in the way of comforts and riches, well, then we can't have that. That's what he's talking about. There's nothing wrong with having access to these things, but when we allow these things to get ahead of our ultimate purpose, then yes, we need to start sacrificing, nailing some more things to the cross. He says we must deny ourselves so that God is first always. And notice what he says in verse 25. He says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What's he find? He finds paradise. He finds ultimately what he thinks he's going to find and fill in all these gaps in his life here in this temporary existence. But no, only to find that was never what God's purpose was at all. There will be times when we may be asked to lose things in this life to be faithful to God. And notice he says, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And in verse 26 he says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? And by this question, Jesus sets the record. We cannot have our ambition to be both. It's one or the other. Again, that's not saying that enjoying things in this life is sinful or wrong, but it's about where our heart is. What is our purpose for living? What is the reason why we do the things, the choices that we make, the decisions that guide us? Is it for money? Is it for fame? Is it for comfort? Is it for success? Or is it for God? And if he blesses with these things, so be it. But I will continue to use them for his honor, and he will come first always. And that's a very difficult choice many times. But he makes it very plain. We cannot have one foot in the world and one foot in the kingdom. He wants both planted and committed so that he will give us the ultimate blessing. And that's what he says in verse 27. He says, for the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Here's the final emphasis. It's in our best interest to listen to the words of Jesus, because they will determine our eternal place of existence. Whereas this is not just, well, it's better for you. You make a better Christian if you're more committed to me. It's not that. It's you either will be in heaven or you won't. I will either be in heaven or I won't, based on my response to this level of commitment. And that's what I want us to think just a little bit about. And let's look at a couple examples that might help us, that we might, yes, be, quote, all in. That we might be totally all in, total in commitment, and not resent it, not have a sense of, well, boy, like remember the Israelites constantly complaining, well, man, what all the stuff we left back in Egypt, all the food we could have eaten, all the meals we had. God has us here, suffering out here. I always kind of miss that picture. Well, I want to look at a couple examples that hopefully helps us realize that, yes, Jesus is the wise teacher to instruct us to follow exactly this direction for our lives, and that we will be the better for it, we will be the wiser for it, and we will reap the reward for it. Let's look at two individuals in Luke chapter 16, the rich man and Lazarus. There was an individual who, quote unquote, found paradise on earth. The way that he lived his life sounds to be about the best way that anyone could perceivably go through this present world. It seems as if there was no comfort that was beyond his reach. It seemed that there was nothing he could not afford. It seemed there was no extravagance that was such. In other words, there was never a time. I don't get the impression that the rich man had to budget much. I don't get that picture. I don't get the picture that when the rich man had his eyes up, or maybe his wife said, "Oh, that's something. Wouldn't it be nice to have?" He's, "Oh, I know, but we got these bills this month." I don't get the impression the rich man ever had to do that at all. I get the impression whatever he saw his eyes on, it's like, I'm getting it, I'm enjoying it, I'm having it, and I can afford it. That seems pretty awesome. It does. I mean, who amongst us wouldn't love to have a life like that? Unlimited supply, cash supply. Amazing. It sounds like the ultimate dream. Here we read of it in Luke chapter 15, and then contrast that with how pitiful and how sad the existence of Lazarus, at least on a physical level. Let's read that in Luke chapter 16 and verse 19. It says, now there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen. Habitually meaning there was never a time when he had to have a hand-me-down purple outfit. He didn't wear hand-me-downs. That was something that was kind of a curse word, no doubt, in his household. We get the new stuff, and we habitually wear it. That I doubt he ever wore the same thing twice again. That reminds me of those people like, once I've worn, I'm not going to wear that again. I'll wear a new outfit. And there's people sometimes like that, they just almost despise the idea of using a coupon or saving money. There are people, they look at that and say, that's what poor people do. I'm rich. I can afford to do whatever I want. And they live luxuriously like that. They like to show off their wealth. And show people, I can afford, just because I can afford to do it. That's how he lived. I'm going to wear this outfit because I can afford to. And I'm going to enjoy it. Not only that, is it habitually dressed in purple and fine linen. And notice, as we might imagine, it was a pretty happy life, joyful, joyously. This wasn't something that, oh, I got to wear a new outfit again. Oh, I got to wear the new name brand. No, that wasn't something that was hard for him. He loved it. It was a joy for him to go through life. Joyously living in splendor. That's extravagance, ultimate extravagance. Notice the key word, every day. He had no hand-me-down days, ever. And he loved it. Why wouldn't that be something that we would have as a noble ambition? Who wouldn't? Compared to, let's read the next individual. Now, next to him in verse 20, there's a poor man named Lazarus who was laid at his gate. How sad compared to the rich man. Every day, while the rich man is living it up, every day, Lazarus, he's just dropped off. He's literally dropped off. There were people that couldn't afford to take care of Lazarus. Those are the kind of people Lazarus lived around. People couldn't afford to that's how poor Lazarus was. We can't help you. You can't even help yourself. The best we can do, we'll plop you off next to this rich man's house and maybe he'll have compassion, maybe he'll give you something. Who wants to go through life like that? I don't think any of us would want to do that. But that was his existence. He was so poor and he was so miserable. The only idea of comfort were dogs licking his sores. So on top of that, he's got diseases, he's got sicknesses. It's like he's got strike 3 of every horrible condition of this world. No money, no prospects, and no health. And no hope. Think about that. There is literally no hope. The only hope he has is maybe this rich man. And again, we look at this rich man is not compassionate. This rich man does not seem like a kind of individual that is very generous. But that was the hope, is that maybe he will. Maybe he'll have compassion. Poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores. And here's the key, longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table. There's the thing that gets you. Could he afford to share even a couple scraps? Absolutely. But he won't. And Lazarus is longing. Can you imagine? I can't think of a more miserable existence. When you're looking out the window of your miserable existence and you're looking at someone who's just laughing it up. And they're so comforted. They have everything in the world. They have more than they even need. And here's someone who can't even get well fed. No doubt probably what added to his sickness was malnutrition. You can't get any better physically if you can't eat right. And no doubt, no wonder this guy's covered with such sickness. He can't feed himself. Can you imagine? Longing. Maybe a crumb, and he'll overlook the crumb, and I'll get that. And I believe Jesus paints the picture this way because he knows what's in our hearts. I'll be honest, I know if I'm given the choice, which one I'd rather have. But something changes the perspective. All of a sudden, Jesus opens up a window to let us see the big picture. There's a bigger picture than just what's in this life. Thank you, Jesus, for showing us that, because we need to see that. We literally are blinded by the God of this world. That's the way that Paul says he blinds us. He weighs all this stuff and makes us think that that's all there is and that's all there ever could be. And it's a lie. What truly is amazing is all of the riches and all the splendor that rich man had, again, as we talked about this morning, couldn't hold a candle to the splendor he could have had if he would have listened to Jesus and said, I'm going to give my life to you and live for you rather than this world. He didn't. He lived for this world. He lived for this pleasure. And notice here's what ended up happening. Verse 22, now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. Oh, the audacity of this guy. Lazarus is just hoping, longing for just a crumb of the food that would fall from your table. You don't have the decency to even offer him anything. But now you see Lazarus in comfort, and you're going to treat him like your slave. Wow. Yeah, just send Lazarus. He's got nothing better to do. Yeah, that poor sap that was laid by my gate. Guess what? That poor sap had more than you could ever hope to have, rich man. That poor suffering sap that you think is so beneath you has everything. And you are left with zilch. You got nothing. You thought you had it all. Well, guess what? When time came over and you invested everything in this side of eternity, you blew it. And he has to face that reality. And that's what he's left with. In verse 23, in Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have Mercy on me. I love it. Mercy on me. Can you catch the entitlement? Have mercy on me. I don't deserve this, is what he's saying. The importance and the riches and the lifestyle I had, I don't deserve this. That's what he got so wrapped up in. But notice here in verse 25, here's the truth. But Abraham said, child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. Yeah? Well, who wouldn't want the good things? Who wouldn't want the good things over the bad things? Well, the key is you didn't realize that's not all there is to life. In fact, that's about a crumb's worth of what real life is. But isn't that the irony? All of your riches amount to about a crumb. They're not going to do you much good here. Not going to do you much good if you did not invest your life into the Lord Jesus Christ and realize if you were going to be blessed with these things, you were the steward and should give him honor and glory and serve for his purposes. But no, the rich man served for his own. And that's the truth. That's why Jesus, he tells us, what would it profit you? And most people laugh. They say, what do you mean, what would it profit me? I think it's a kind of, it's a rhetorical question. What do you mean, what it would profit? Everything. It profits me everything to gain the world. Well, that's if you don't realize that this is this much compared to the big picture of what life is. This is not all of life. This is a little, what does James say, a vapor? This is a vapor. That's what this life is. Here for a moment and then gone the minute you turn around. It vanishes. It flees away. So let the rich man be a sobering reality, lest we become tempted to put all of our efforts and all of our mind too much in this world that doesn't profit us anything. It doesn't. Unless we're using it as God's stewards to be faithful to him. On the other hand, let's look at another example. And I know Chuck warned me about this. I keep aiming at that. Let's look at Job. Job is someone who's very unique because he had both. He had both. He had the kind of extravagant lifestyle most people would just be like, when you look at the inventory of his household, the stuff he had access to, it's crazy. There really was. When he says there's no one like my servant Job, it was more than just integrity. This was in terms of his luxury, his lifestyle, how people looked up to him. Job talks about how people looked up to this guy. He was a man of reputation and honor and prestige. People envied the way Job lived. He was a good life. You know what you got to love about Job? Job is the perfect picture of someone who, while it seems that he had both, he really only had one. He always only had one. Even when he supposedly had all these riches, he always in his mind said, they don't really paint the whole picture because I have so much more, even though I don't have them anymore. Isn't that amazing? Job is that perfect kind of counterbalance to what so many times the rich people of this world, that is what I want to say, the rich people of the world, the sinful rich people of this world. In so many ways, Job is refreshing. Because it tells us, no, there's nothing wrong with being able to have them. But how much better to see the perspective of what they're here for and what we're here for. And Job did. If we go over to the book of Job very quickly, we know the story. But I just briefly want to read. We read of the great mishap, the great misfortune Job went under. But what I'm amazed with is chapter after chapter, literally, of Job's unique spiritual perspective of one who kept his integrity, even though his own wife said, Job, what are you living for now? Seriously, Job, it's over. That's what his wife said. Job, the purpose of life is over. You have nothing. Curse God and die. And the rest really of Job's speeches are showing why he refused to do that. What is it that Job understood? What is it that Job saw? And what he saw, his eye was on what we talked about this morning. Even with all the luxury, even with all the riches, even with all the things Job had, he never lost sight of what truly this life was about. That's what's so amazing about Job. So let's read very quickly the sad predicament Job falls into. But let's look at the beautiful way that he understood that really it's not what this life is about anyways. But Job chapter 1, we read here this amazing description. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. There's a reason why that's the first thing we know about him. In other words, if there was a rip in your Bible and all of a sudden you couldn't read verses 2 through 5, you don't need to know it. Because you already know everything about Job. Catch that. You already know everything about Job. You don't need to know how rich he is. It's irrelevant. Why? Because it was irrelevant to Job. In Job's mind, all that matters is verse 1. And everything Job says for the rest of Job convinces us of that. His riches were irrelevant to what his purpose was. That's amazing. And this is before Jesus ever said, what would it profit you? Job has this mindset. He knows, what would it profit me? To curse God, give up God, just what? Because I'm mad and I'm upset that I have to go through life without these comforts? But notice it's amazing. That's all you really need to know about Job. The rest is that's just context. Verse 2. Well, here's the context. It's pretty good context. Pretty good one. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the East. He had it all. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one in his day. Where was it? His sons, they're just enjoying life. Yeah, he's rich enough. He can give his children a good lifestyle. They can enjoy life every day. It's pretty good. He's generous. Yeah, you're my heirs. You're my children. I want you to have a good life. Pretty good. Man, his family's blessed. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one in his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. So that's what Job did continue. In other words, so again, the only thing we really need to know about Job is verse 1 and verse 5. Because even with all the things his children had, what was his ambition for his children? I want my children to have everything I have. It was, I want them hopefully to inherit the faith that I have. I hope that I can help them be faithful to God. And I want them to realize that that's what my real ambition is for them. And as we realize that, yes, Job is taken. Why are these things taken? Because Satan doesn't think Job will last a minute with God after all this is taken. That's what he thinks. That's what he accuses Job of. He's gonna turn on you. Turn over to Job chapter 14. Context. Job has lost all of his possessions. He's lost his children. He's lost his health. He's essentially the Lazarus of the Old Testament, a version of Lazarus. And in other words, gives us a window why the Lazarus of the New Testament was so faithful. I wonder how many times the Lazarus of the New Testament would sit there at the gate of the rich man and think about the story of Job. I like to think that maybe that was something that could have given him confidence of why he was how he was. Perhaps things like what we read in Job chapter 14, and note verse 14. Here's what Job, a man suffering with sickness and nothing in life, seemingly to live for, he says this in verse 14. He says, if a man dies, will he live again? All the days of my struggle I will wait until my change comes. There's a change coming for Job. Well, haven't things changed enough? That's not the change he's talking about. He's talking about the ultimate change when I die and I leave it all behind. My blessings and my curses, my highs and my lows. One day I'm leaving all of that behind. And so what's your purpose, Job? Verse 15. You will call and I will answer you. You will long for the work of your hands. For now you number my steps. You do not observe my sin. My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and you wrap up my iniquity. But the falling mountain crumbles away, and the rock moves from its place. Water wears away stones, and torrents wash away the dust of the earth. So you destroy man's hope. Was what he's talking about. He says, the hope that Job would ever reach the attainment, it's gone. He's living with the reality. And again, I don't know which is worse. Job, I know Job knows which was. He said, it would be better if I never been born. But the fact that I was given all these things and then taken away. Now he's realizing the hope that he'll ever get it back. He doesn't think that's ever going to happen again. It's gone. And so this is what he says. Verse 20. You forever overpower him, and he departs. You change his appearance and send him away. His sons achieve honor, but he does not know it. Or they become insignificant, but he does not perceive it. But his body pains him, and he mourns only for himself. Well, what's Job getting at? What is this change he's longing for? Turn over to chapter 16. In Job chapter 16, start in verse 6. In Job 16, in verse 10, I'm sorry, Job chapter 16, verse 10. He says, they have gaped at me with their mouth. They have slapped me on the cheek with contempt. They have massed themselves against me. God hands me over to ruffians and tosses me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he shattered me. And he has grasped me by the neck and shaken me to pieces. He has also set me up as his target. His arrows surround me. Without mercy, he splits my kidneys open. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks through me with breach after breach. He runs at me like a warrior. I have sewed sackcloth over my skin and thrust my horn in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, do not cover my blood, and let there be no resting place for my cry. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my advocate is on high. My friends are my scoffers. My eye, notice, weeps to God. He says, even my own friends don't get it. They can't see it. And no matter what they can do to pour out in derision against me, I'm holding confidence to something that I'm not going to give up on God. And notice the way he ends this chapter. Notice what he says there in verse 21. Oh, that a man might plead with God as a man with his neighbor. For when a few years are past, I shall go the way of no return. In Job's mind, I'm not coming back here whether I ever get on top again or if I go even lower than where I am now. I'm going someplace where this is going to be far, far in the past, and I'm going to finally be with God. To Job, the context of what he had or what he didn't have seemed to be irrelevant. Even though, yes, he realized it was a great pain to him, no doubt. One final passage. Turn to Psalm 16. We'll end on this chapter. Psalm 16. How can this help you and I? How can we be challenged and helped to keep our perspective in the same mindset as the rich or the poor, or Lazarus and Job, and all those who Jesus challenges, that we would put our whole faith in the world yet to come and not in this one. Let's read just verses 1 through 11, a very short psalm, and we'll end our lesson. Psalm 16 and verse 1. He says, "Preserve me, O God, for I take refuge in you. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord." I love this next line. "I have no good besides you. As for the saints who are in the earth, they are the majestic ones in whom is all my delight." Did you catch that? That's pretty cool. In other words, irrelevant of your status in income, career, comfort, you are the majestic ones. I like that. If you're a child of God, you are the majestic one. You are the one that has everything going for you. In verse 4, he says, "The sorrows of those who have bartered for another god will be multiplied. I shall not pour out their drink offerings of blood, nor will I take their names upon my lips. Which I will not shrink to praise the name, regardless of how successful they may be in this earth's life. If they are not of God, I don't have anything to envy of them. I have no reason to praise them. I praise the majestic ones, regardless of status of life." Verse 5, "The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, my heritage is beautiful to me. I will bless the Lord who has counseled me. Indeed, my mind instructs me in the night. I have set the Lord continually before me. Because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will dwell securely. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay." In other words, this existence is not vain or purposeless. In other words, there is a place I'm going, and I'm not going to be left behind in the dust when I die. In other words, when people mourn my name, they think, "Oh, how sad," or how now whatever blessings he had, then they're gone, or how like the Lazarus, what a miserable existence, but we can't even talk about anything good and positive he ever had. Just this horrible place of misery. He says, that doesn't matter to me. I'm going to leave it there in the dust, and you're not going to leave me there. In other words, my legacy is not going to be indicated by what kind of life I live when I got put into the tomb. My legacy is that God is at my right hand always, even beyond death. And that's what he says. Notice what he says in verse 10. "You will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever." So yes, we heartily amen the teaching of Jesus. What would it profit to gain the whole world, only to lose our souls? Let's not be tempted to make that exchange. Let's be grateful for the blessings we do have. Let's be content. Let's be delighted, yes, in the times when we are afforded comforts that God sees fit to bestow in our hands, but let us constantly have our eyes focused on the greater picture and know that we are truly blessed if we follow God and we can be with him for all of eternity. If anyone's with us and never obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, we encourage you that you would make that exchange of your life, that you would realize there's nothing greater living for, and that you would take up your cross, that you would deny yourself and follow Christ and put all of your life in his hands. Won't you confess that he is Christ and Lord, and based on that confession, be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, to be reborn, changed, be made a spiritual heir in his kingdom so that you can inherit the blessings he has set for you in heaven. If you need to do that, we'll encourage you. Won't you come to the front while we stand and sing this psalm of encouragement? Come and we'll gladly help you put on Christ in baptism and obey the gospel.